Hello, and welcome to another episode of Wired for Wonder. My name is Lori Kirkland, and I am excited to be joined today with Kathleen Perley, who is not only a professor and AI advisor at Rice Business, Jones Graduate School of Business. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
they have very complicated names, but
Okay.
Rice University, yeah, absolutely.
Rice University, as well as she's the CEO and founder of Demystify AI. So, being a professor, an academic, and then jumping to being a CEO of an AI company, why don't you tell us kind of how you made that jump?
Well, I always say I'm a bit of an accidental entrepreneur. My mom always was a big, strong proponent that, say yes enough and things will happen and you will find your purpose in life. And so I actually started my career in linguistics because I struggled with language. I'm actually dyslexic. So wanted to study the thing that held me back the most. And really fell into digital advertising in that space, became an entrepreneur there, and sold my company Decode about 2 years ago. Uh, Thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank you. Yeah, to two private equity firms and got the opportunity to do adjunct at a class in 2020. It was 2024 in the spring of 2024 and fell in love with teaching. And so I've been teaching at Rice for about a year now and really love it and have made it more of a permanent role. And like any serial entrepreneur, can only be out of it for so long before that bug just bites you again and you kind of start leaning into it a bit more. And so starting that whole journey all over again, which is fun.
Okay, so one, so fascinating. And I love how you keep going back to kind of what drives you. Um, and I would ask in the time of AI, how are you feeling that your purpose or your ability to really see what drives you is helping you, really stay on top of everything that AI, all the changes AI is bringing?
I think it comes down to two things. I mean, I think, sometimes you have to think about some of your challenges as some of your gifts. So, not only having dyslexia, but I also have ADHD, which means I tend to hyper focus and I tend to really want to understand the why in terms of how things work. And so, leaning into that as it pertains to AI has really helped me kind of stay ahead of what's going on in the space, leaning on my background in the world of linguistics, which a lot of the large language models and the native and generative AI foundational models are built on, has
Hmm.
been huge. And then really just being open and curious. I mean, I think it's something, not everyone has the answers, myself included. I still struggle, I feel like, to keep up with what's going on in the world of AI. And I would tell executives and leaders across the board, like, everyone's kind of at a level playing field. So the more curious you can be, the more, don't focus on your expertise, focus on exploration. Think about how you can bring the worlds of things that you have a deep knowledge in to the world of AI and how those two worlds might merge or come together.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm right there with you, right? I actually did a post based on some client interaction around how chasing your joy is one of the easiest ways to actually understand AI because one, there's so much stuff going on in everybody. The workplace is changing for everyone, right? The future of work is not going to look the same. Not only do we have the pandemic, now we have the change AI is bringing.
Yep.
And that's forcing is leaders to lead differently. You're going to have some employees who can work really fast and are using technology and are, cutting
Mhm.
their work week down to 2 to 4 hours. That's totally happening in the
Yeah.
workplace. And then you have others who aren't doing it at all. So all of a sudden, as a leader, you have to manage different type. You're not managing the same as you used to, right? You have to be able to change quickly, adjust, and coach more on a per individual basis or per team basis. Which I just find really interesting and staying curious to the things that you like,
Yep.
uh, to me seems like a really, really easy step. Um, what is one thing that you see that leaders kind of time and time again are running into as a big challenge right now?
I think the biggest thing I see is that a lot of leaders see AI as almost like a light switch they turn on. So if they get the right tool and they implement it, everything will start to work perfectly. They'll start to see huge ROI returns on their investment in the tech, but they forget about the very important part people play in the process. and how to ensure that your organization is ready for it, and think about it more at a larger scale. And not only in terms of how AI can create efficiencies, which it will, but how it's going to transform the way your organization works, how your customers interact with you, and also how your employees interact. I mean, I think you look at the most recent article and some of the commentary out of Dario Amadea and some of the LinkedIn leaders as it pertains to AI's impact on entry level jobs. And
Yeah.
you really have to really start rethinking, what does it mean to be an entry level worker in today's world? And if you're up leveling their work and it's taking work from maybe more mid level or senior level folks, what is then being asked of them? And
Yeah.
so changing a lot. But I would say don't get overwhelmed. Start small and really start exploring. I think first and foremost, not only chasing the passions that you have as an individual, but also what are the friction points? What are the things that everyone doesn't love about their job? And my mom, she was a New Yorker through and through, and she used to always have this quote, like, if you love your job and you think you're getting paid what you should, you're either doing something illegal or working for the mob. And I was like, Mom, working for the mob is illegal, but nuance there. And so I think, everyone has that thing, right? Like, I have not met a single person who's like, wakes up on a Monday and is like, oh, can't wait to do my expense report, right?
Right?
So,
I know. And I mean, and that's it. It's like for the last 100+ years, really, since the production line thinking has come about, we've tried to make humans work like robots, only doing this, and everyone's job keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller to the point of like the personal satisfaction of at work. And I had just spent 5 years at a Fortune 500, and I just feel like more than 50% of people, maybe like 75%, are miserable because they're not contributing, because they're not doing the things that they do naturally. Um, and at DeepHumanX, we talk a lot about the human operating system. And I'll share with you one of the things that I do naturally is throw a party.
yeah.
Well, yes, I would love to get paid to throw parties at work, but that's not really how it happens. However, I've really learned that leaning into active design thinking workshops, cross team, complex problem solving, I actually can use my skill of throwing a party to facilitate workshops, to be able to move the energy between cross functional teams. And that insight, right, is a great way that I get to do something that I don't have to think about. And it allows me to reduce the number of individual meetings and trying to play
Mhm.
politics between everybody.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it like takes time off of my plate, and it's building trust and teamwork at the same time, right? So that's like a way that leaning into what you're personally good at,
Yeah.
all of a sudden you have the ability to do. With AI, what is something that you have been surprised that you've been able to explore a little bit more as a leader, especially as a coach to coaches, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think the biggest thing for me is I am somebody, and I didn't realize this until going, teaching again and going through some of the MBA programs and all of that as well. There's certain individuals who think by talking it out, certain individuals who have to be quiet and alone to think through things or write it down. I'm definitely a talker. It's not surprising I'm on a podcast, but I have to verbalize to think and process information. And so before that was really challenging for me because I would have to have somebody I could trust or depend on that can understand, like, hey, I'm going to have a little bit of verbal diarrhea for a minute or two, or 15 minutes, and like no need to like really try to understand any of it. I just need to get it out so I can figure out where my brain's going. And now I can use AI to do that. And it takes that pressure off of all those folks who used to have to listen to me kind of talk my way through it, as well as really like be able to create more consistency and understanding of why I'm thinking a certain way, how to explain that to others. And so utilizing that advanced voice feature within ChatGPT, or utilizing, I created an AI voice agent in 11 labs that I talk to on a regular basis, has been a huge assistance for me and has transformed the way I think and work completely.
And do you feel like it allows you to get so first off, I totally relate to you. My poor husband, may he rest in peace, used to have to listen to me. That's how I process too. I'm like, I just got to get it out. Please don't fix anything. Please
Yeah.
don't. I'm not looking for direction. It's how
Yeah.
I process. But I have also taken advantage of the ability to, I have got many custom chat bots, but really with much of the technology to use the vocal component of it. And I feel like it's really helped me get deeper into my thinking a whole lot faster. I mean, I'm talking like things I've thought about for 10 years. I was like, you just put that into a concise paragraph that I've been stirring in my head for a decade, right? What are some things that you found when you started playing with the voice controls?
I think just the ability to explore ways in terms of how we think about things. And so, one prime example recently, there's another professor at Rice who is absolutely incredible, has spent a lot of work on Six Sigma, lean, things of that nature. And he and I were talking about some of those methodologies. And I was like, well, have you thought about how it's going to change with AI? And he was like, well, I haven't, had a chance. And of course, like we were talking and then like the meeting ended. And so we had to both run to our respective classes. And, typically I would have waited till we had lunch again. And then I'd have to like remember what we had talked about. But instead in the car on my way home, I was like, I talked to my AI agent and I was like, how do you think this is going to change? Do you think, instead of inventory and like employee count, we're going to be thinking about computing power and cognitive load and task
Yeah.
stitching? And
And
are these
flow.
and flow, and are these the levers that are going to be what changes? And so being able to then go back to my meeting I sent him a follow-up email and I was like, what are your thoughts on this? And his eyes just got so big and he was like, do you want to do a research project together? And I was like, I don't even know what that means, but sure. Sounds like fun.
Let's do it.
Let's do
You're
it.
like, I can go to ChatGPT and figure out what it means. So
Yeah, like how to do a formal research paper as a formal academic, because, just started my career in academia. And I think those things are the best. And one thing I will tell you that I created a job description for my AI voice agent that I talk to all the time. And it understands like my org chart, it understands my different roles. But I actually created its own job description, like you would for any human. And one of the things I asked it to do was to challenge me. And so anytime I come up with a concept or an idea, one of the things I want it to do is say, like, kind of play the devil's advocate for me and ask
Love
me
that.
to like kind of push back and like really push my thinking. And so I think you're right. It's not only being able to organize the chaos that's inside my brain, but also get deeper because it's pushing me to have these conversations and think more deeply about it rather than waiting for somebody to kind of push back as it occurs over 6 to 9 months.
Right, like to see what I 100%, I love that, and I agree with you because that's part of the biggest frustration. So I've been in tech in enterprise for 25 years, and literally it's like people don't realize that at least 50% of every software project is about the human component, either adopting, either resistant, either somebody not feeling like something that's very challenging for them was considered. And when you start to go deeper more quickly and you have those conversations, you can actually make sure, like I ask a lot of, what else am I forgetting in this conversation? What
Yeah.
else, what else should I be thinking of? I actually, like you too, I have an Oprah, Michelle Obama, Eckhart Tolle type of
Yeah.
guy. But when I need some spiritual stuff, I have one that looks at how I think, but it really is around using it to make myself better because I have a lot of thoughts. But if I can be more concise, it makes it
Yeah.
easier to connect with somebody in a much
100%.
faster manner. So first off, congratulations. You just released a book. It's called AI Made Simple, Results Made Real. So congrats on writing
Thank
a
you.
book.
Thank you. It was a long journey, but made it through.
What was your motivation for that? And what did you learn about yourself doing that?
Well, I think the one thing we talked about a little bit already is that my brain does not necessarily work in a linear fashion. It is controlled chaos in there. And so having AI help me in writing the book, I also had an amazing ghostwriter that helped make sense. Sometimes I'll go from point A to F, and in my head, it makes sense how I got there. But I oftentimes find that like I'm making connections mentally that I assume are pretty obvious, but they aren't. So that was a big process for me as well. But what really encouraged me is after teaching my first course at Rice, some of my students were like, can you transcribe everything? And can you write this all down? Can we record your lectures? Can we, and, initially, Rice has a policy that, if you're sick or there are extenuating circumstances, you can record them. But, they really don't prefer not to record. And so I created this book because I really wanted to remove the smoke and mirrors around AI. It isn't a magic spell, right? Some of the same challenges that you have as an organization today will still be there tomorrow with AI. And really focusing on how do you as a leader get in the driver's seat. And I think there's a base level of literacy that's needed so that you can move AI in a way that works and aligns with your vision for your organization or for your own career. And so the book was really sought out to say, okay, if you're non-technical, that's okay. We're going to give you just enough so that you can hold your own with the tech folks and they don't utilize language to intimidate you. But you can really start to.
That never happens.
It's funny. I was like on a call the other day and somebody brought up Kubernetes and I was like, oh my gosh, like I haven't heard that term in forever, but it's like one of those other things that seems really daunting. But when you think about it, it's not a major, it's just a different language. Like if you were to
Yeah.
switch from one industry to another.
Yeah.
And
No, and
it's so important.
well, I love that you did that because I feel the same way, right? At DeepHumanX, we work with organizations, executive teams, leaders to help bring AI as a tool into actual team environments, which is great. But one of the big things that I feel like we face all the time is the fear around it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the fear of, oh my gosh, there's so much. Everyone's telling me it's moving at speed. I can feel it moving around me. And there is either people who the cognitive load feels like it's too much, or it's just plain fear. And so I love to hear that that's kind of what I'm hearing from you is this is where your book really plays is that you're trying to say, hey, let me help you take that first step in.
Yeah, take the first step in, provide some frameworks because you're right, the tech is changing, but the way that we need to think about it shouldn't change that much. And so, what are the frameworks that you can use today and tomorrow as the tech evolves? And really to start, because I've talked to a lot of companies and I either hear one of two things. They've implemented a AI council within their organization a year ago, and they've not done any AI pilots. Or they've provisioned it and they're treating it a lot like a software rollout. And neither one of those
Mm-hmm.
is the right approach. And I think oftentimes people think, okay, I was talking to one company and they're like, we're going to hire a leading AI person from either, I think they were looking at AWS and Meta as like two recruiting places. And I said, I think that's wonderful that you have the budget and the time to like go after somebody at that caliber to lead the AI initiatives at your organization, but also think about what makes the most sense. Because if they're coming from a research lab or one of those big firms, they're used to being able to think about things for long periods of time. They're used to having a lot of resources, right? It's very different when you apply it to business. And it's like I used to tell my accountant, and this is a prime example, right? My accountant used to always say, like, well, I'd be like, what are give me a rough idea on these numbers. And she's like, well, I haven't closed the books yet. And I'd be like, I don't need 100% accuracy. Like I'm okay with that. And I think a lot of companies overlook the fact that having deep industry knowledge is just as important as understanding the tech side.
Well, right. Like using AI to take advantage of your intellectual capital can help you like leapfrog against competitors. And you kind of touched on something that made me go back to like the days of the internet. So I'm old enough to have gotten out of college and was basically there, worked for .com in
Yeah.
1999. So I remember when I worked for a company for 2 years and our business model was a .com, only to
Yeah.
look back 20 years later and be like, we based a whole business, a whole company off of a web address. Well, yes, that was how the transition took. And that's where I feel like we're seeing similar stuff with AI, where it's not that companies, and we're seeing use cases every day that are popping up, but the companies are still the use cases are very limited, right? So
Yeah.
so that's just kind of where we're at. But what we're seeing is individuals who are now being able to take and move faster. And so old ways of working, if you're not yourself using it, you can sound like I did 20 years ago when it was like, oh, that's a web address. So people who are using AI are in leaders who are doing that are already starting to see the difference between those who do it and those that don't. And that gap is only going to get wider, right?
It really is. And I will say, like, I equate it a lot of times to like a car, right? So even my 75-year-old father uses AI. And it's not because he's super tech savvy. He's not. I still get calls all the time about, fixing his internet or, rewiring his printer, even though that's really not my expertise. But what's happened is it's a lot like something we use every day, which is a car, right? Like the models that underlie the systems are like the engines in a car, but we
Mhm.
don't manipulate the engine. We manipulate a steering wheel, which is like our prompting or the interface. We're able to pick different models, which are kind of like a gear shift, right? Like if I need something for more coding or something more creative, I can pick a '04 mini high model or a 4.5 model as it pertains to creative writing, right? Depending on what I need, like you change depending on road conditions. And I think you also have that gas pedal. And so when I talk to individuals, I say, it's really, having been in the AI space, right? The transformer model happened in 2017, but no one started talking to me about AI until 2022.
Right. Until it got to be tangible, November 30th,
Yes.
2022. Everyone, just so everyone knows, that's when ChatGPT became public or went public. And it did change. People are like, oh, wait a minute. Okay.
Yeah.
The actual idea of the software itself, which you mentioned, that people often have been like, okay, implement the software. And then one day we might get to the business challenge. Like there's a big shift in the marketplace, which is you actually need the business and leaders to be thinking at a higher level because soon, and I have a client who is already doing this, AI is helping them tick off their whole product list of, 1,000 things and it's doing it quickly. So now where the business is at is they're looking at, wait a minute. So if we got our list, our never ending list done, well, where are we going to go next? Which is a great call for leaders to really lean into our humanity to be like, well, what kind of problems do we want to solve? Do we want to solve, cure cancer? Do we want to clean up the environment? Whatever is passionate for that organization and individuals, like that's where we have this huge opportunity to spend our time.
Yeah, and I think it's even more important now than ever to better understand your different audiences or your customer segments, right? And being able to personalize the experiences for their unique needs too. So whether it's, more altruistic or even just better experience, better quality, better whatever it may be for each different audience that you serve, or maybe it's a new segment that you haven't served, but you can now. And I think there's a huge opportunity there. And I think that's one thing people often overlook. We've talked about how AI is going to transform businesses, but many people don't talk about how AI is going to change how we buy things, how we evaluate things, how we think about things. And so I was actually on a call earlier today with my internal team, and we were talking about some of the new AI features within Google search. And literally not a single person on the call could tell me the last time they used Google.
Right. Right.
And so it
It's
changes
amazing. And then
everything.
there's many people who are still using the chatbots like they're just a Google search. I agree with you. And I love that. And I think that that's where someone like you, like what DeepHumanX is doing is right, is we're all about let's help change the mindset because we can do awesome stuff. And you can see things and problems that you didn't even understand were there. And all of a sudden solutions are
Yeah.
coming into play, which is really interesting because this is happening faster than anything else in my lifetime. And it could be really cool stuff that we could do within organizations to make the human to human connection better, and actually get off of screens, right? Which is
Yeah.
what I think
Oh,
everybody wants.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I don't know if you saw recently Klarna. So Klarna got some heat over the time. They've implemented AI agents within their customer service support team. And their AI agent could handle the equivalent of about 700,000 queries a month of customer support tickets. They were then able to expand
Amazing.
to many countries. So they were able to, they ended up going to 35 languages they supported. They were able to open it 24/7. The AI agent on average response time was 2 minutes versus 11 for a human agent. And so your immediate response is they're going to let go of all of their human customer service agents.
Which they did say something about that.
And
Didn't they say about hiring? Like they said something like you have to prove that AI can't do your job.
well, and they did, they did cut staff and their customer service support team. They were able to add 40, I think it was like 40 million to their bottom line in terms of net profit. But recently they've just come back out and they said, we're not getting rid of all human customer support folks. We're actually creating a VIP human experience for our most beloved clients that allows our customer service team to get better training, more hands-on support, access to more resources so they can help solve problems and challenges. And so really you have to think about like, okay, AI has taken away part of this role, but what then becomes, what can we do? We can cut a bunch of staff, which they did that's part of what they did. But they
And then they
also
backtracked.
now are thinking about, how do we make this human part our actual white glove experience? And
Right.
and
Like,
so it
which
comes
is
full
what
circle.
everybody wants.
Yeah.
Customers want it, your employees want it. You're right. All of us want to go back to the human connection. And I think one of the things of the Klarna story that stood out to me about that, I love that you brought that up because they're like thinking in public and they're very courageous to be
Yes.
doing that. So I love it. But they're like, hey, we realize that it's not human and it's not AI. It's actually human and AI together
Mhm.
allows us to become better humans, become better able to serve our customers, and at the same time eliminate some of the, the 3-second chats that their AI agent can do so that maybe I can just get my question answered and I don't have to wait on hold for 45 minutes.
Exactly.
But if I want to, I can call, directly now. So I love that you brought that. And you kind of bring up that's a very tangible thing to say, hey, look, the future of work is changing. If you were in, let's say, 2 to 3 sentences, what do you think the future of work is going to look like because of AI?
So being aspirational, I think it's going to look like a few things. I think a lot of the mundane is going to go away, hopefully, which would be great. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of room for curiosity and exploration for the organizations that implement it correctly, right? That create the psychological safety needed to do great things with this technology as a support. And I think you're also going to see just the ability for, I think, two things. Everyone's going to become a manager
Yes.
because you're going to be managing AI
You're going to be
agents.
managing and coaching everybody,
So you
your boss, your peers, everyone.
And I think what's also going to happen as a result of that is EQ is going to become more valuable than IQ, which is because intelligence is becoming commoditized because you can get them in these models. And I think, I was oftentimes told, like, I'm a jack of all trade, master of none in a way. Because of a little bit of my ADHD coming back, where I loved learning about a lot of things. I hated being tied to doing the same thing over and over and over again. And that's why I went into agency life, because I was doing the same thing, but for different clients, which felt different enough. And so I think the value of emotional intelligence and the ability to be kind of a jack of all trades, to see a bigger picture, to see the interconnections of how things work, is going to become more valuable than extreme depth in one very narrow area.
I like that. And I feel like that is so right. Like it's almost like in work, we've become so micro where we're looking at like let's an example, if you want to go from Denver to Chicago, right? And you tell your team that, but instead what you do is say, okay, now I want you to map out every stop sign you're going to be at on the way, and I want you to check in with me, right? It's almost like we've done that at work. Like we're checking in so many ways that there is no freedom for the
Mm-hmm.
team to come back and say, hey, we actually could fly there faster than driving. So checking the stop signs
Is
isn't going to be valuable anymore, right? It's going to be looking at, wait a minute, what is the bigger goal? Oh, it's getting to Chicago and the safest, fastest route, right? And not like in breaking up with that leadership model of I have to tell you exactly how to do it,
Yep.
because we don't need that anymore. Now we've got literally all information democratized by
Yeah.
using, chatbots. Um, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. And I think that's what will differentiate those organizations that succeed and those who don't. Is not whether or not they select the right AI tool to implement, but whether or not their leadership really leans into this shift that requires, not to lean on your expertise, but onto this idea of exploration, not to lean on, having all the answers to every question, but knowing which questions that we need to be asking, right? Leaning into this humility side of it, and not so much having to be this leader that's infallible, and
Yeah,
creating
right.
this sense
And
of,
probably lonely. Like it can be, leadership can be lonely right now. And when you're all of a sudden going to start getting things at record speed coming to you, like being alone is not, and having the answers is not even going to be an option anymore. That's going to be taken off the table because things are going to move way too quickly for any one person. And I think you and I are both humble enough to say, I don't have the answers. You don't have the answers. No one person has the answers.
oh,
Well, Kathleen, I have to say you have so much insight and wisdom to share with the Wired for Wonder audience. And I want to just end our session with one last question for you. If you were to give advice to any leaders out there, any people out there, what would be the 3 human skills that you would tell people to focus on to help them as they're trying to understand AI and move into this changing world?
I think the 3 skills I would tell leaders to really focus on are, I think first and foremost, really leaning in and developing that curiosity itch, if you will. So many executives I oftentimes hear where they're just like, okay, I just need to hire the right person. And even as a former CEO, like yes, you need to hire the right people. That is, I always said, hire people smarter than you. And that's absolutely the case. But I feel like you can't delegate this fully, right? Because it really ties into how your organization should really think about the future of work for your employees, how it applies to your customer base, what you offer. And so it's really part of the vision. And so as a CEO or as an executive leader, you have to understand at least some of the technology or baseline so you can really start to think about how it's going to transform your business and how your team works. So my first advice would be get curious, get your hands dirty, start working that muscle again. And so that would be my first piece of advice. The other 2 that I think are important for skill development is really leaning back into, what I'll say standard leadership skills. So the first one being really focusing on kind of similar, whether it's asking AI or asking your internal teams, asking questions. I had somebody once tell me that I needed to be more Yoda and less hero. And so rather than trying to like fill in the gaps or ask questions and then answer them as I was going in a way, just to say, well, what do you think? What are your thoughts? When people used to come to me, and I think the same is true with AI, talking to people who are hesitant and asking them, what are some of your, like asking those questions, or those who are leaning in and asking those same questions. What excites you about this? Why, how are you getting involved in this? How are you staying up to date? Asking a lot of really good questions and leaning into that Yoda style leadership, I think is key. And then the last piece is really focusing on the human capital of relationships. I think one thing I've noticed and I've seen is people think, and I think short-sightedly, that if it means what it means to be an AI first company or an AI driven company means you have no care for the humans within your organization. And the goal is efficiency by removing human jobs. But I think AI first doesn't necessarily mean you have to think about it from a kind of a job loss, efficiency gain strategy. It can also be human first. And so really leaning into understanding how your team works and thinking through, once again, some of those managerial skill sets where you're thinking about how do you train delegation? How do you train people to move up in terms of their thinking and their strategy? Because everyone's going to have to be a manager. And so these are the things I think I would definitely focus on. So, leaning into the curiosity, getting your hands dirty, asking the right questions, both from an AI perspective and from the human perspective. And last but not least, really understanding how do you level up your employees and how do you teach them to delegate to AI agents.
I love all of those. And if you look at the research that's out there, you mentioned the Klarna case earlier in the episode, but really there's so much research coming out about how going AI only isn't healthy and going or no AI at all isn't healthy, that it's
Right.
really about human enhanced, right? Like
Yeah.
really AI augmented. It's a tool, as we talked about earlier. Well, Kathleen, you have such insight and wisdom, and I really appreciate you being on here. If somebody wanted to get in contact with you, where should we send them?
I would say just reach out to me on LinkedIn and send me a message. I would love to connect. I'm a super nerd and I occasionally post thoughts on there as well. I'm constantly on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out to me on there.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you everyone for listening today. If you want any more, please feel reach out to DeepHumanX or Kathleen, and we can give you some more information on how to make sure humans stay in the loop as AI is progressing. Thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.